Hey, what's up everybody and welcome back to News Dose. So Sony just had their Q1 fiscal year report, and as to be expected, the PlayStation business is currently down. Now, I want to be very clear about this up front. Again, this is to be expected as the game industry as a whole is down due to various circumstances that are out of their control. We actually just saw the Xbox report the other day, and despite some positives, they were down compared to their previous reports. So just kind of keep that in mind as the industry as a whole is down, and this, again, was not completely unexpected coming from Sony. But however, they're both spreading some positive hope as well as warning of a downward trend. So we'll talk about that today and take a look as to exactly what's happening here, as well as we'll also talk about an upcoming Xbox exclusive that just got a full official release date. Yeah, that's kind of where we are right now. We're just celebrating concrete release dates because you never really know anymore with all of these delays, which in this video is going to be very prevalent. To start today off, though, I want to talk about a game that just released today. Fans have really waited on this game for what feels like forever, and as the anticipation just grew and grew, well, it's finally up on us. And no, I'm not talking about Xenoblade 3, but rather I'm talking about Digimon Survive. Digimon Survive is finally out, and I feel like it needs some recognition as Bandai Namco has done this game very little favors. Not only is it launching side by side with a big Nintendo exclusive, of course, being Xenoblade 3, but also for whatever reason, Bandai Namco has elected to not send out any review codes. So right now, Digimon Survive is getting very little coverage in what is the most important time for a new game being launch day. Of course, though, with no review codes being sent out, a lot of the times that is actually a bad sign. But I did check out some reviews on Steam, and currently, despite it having some technical problems such as an early crash, other than that, it seems like fans are really enjoying it. It does currently have an 83 positive rating with nearly 300 user reviews, though it is noteworthy that a lot of these ratings might be coming from huge fans of the franchise. The one thing that I have noticed is that it really just all kind of depends on what your expectations are, as it is being described as a mix of a Shin Megami Tensei tactics game with a Digimon visual novel, though it is more of a visual novel than anything else. So as long as you understand that, it seems like so far at the very least, it might be a good game. Though if you want to wait for critic reviews, that's completely understandable. It really, though, is just such a shame on how little Bandai Namco has pushed this game. Now, we also got a great update for any of those who are excited to get their hands on a Steam Deck and currently have it reserved, because Valve actually just posted an update letting it be known that all fans who currently have it reserved will now receive it sometime this year. Yeah, that's a very surprising and welcome update, but that does mean that in a lot of cases, your Steam Deck will arrive earlier than expected. They did note that several people who were in Q4 are now set for Q3, which is July to September. As for those that are set in Q4, you'll instead get your Steam Deck between October and sometime in December. So that's just absolutely fantastic news, and all this is because many of the supply chain issues that were affecting it prior has improved, and they can now produce more units than ever before. This is actually a really good sign that might also quietly be good news for other platforms as well. And the reason I say that is because with this strictly being an improvement to their supply chain, maybe, just maybe, we'll start to see improvements for other platforms that's also been having supply issues. That's just been such a major problem all generation, and we'll actually talk a little bit more about that in a bit. What we do know, though, is that you should expect to receive an email from Valve sometime this year regarding your reservation, and that is a very important part of this process. Don't be like me, where I missed my Steam Deck email earlier this year, and because of that, I'm still unfortunately waiting for my next reservation like much of the rest of the world. So just kind of keep an eye on your email, and actually, you should probably just go ahead and check your Steam Deck reservation page to see when yours is planned. Let's go and talk about PlayStation, though, as again, they did just post their quarterly fiscal year results, and there's been some pretty strong reactions over this. PlayStation, in fact, did have a down quarter, though in some ways this should be expected. For the most part, I don't think that it was particularly too surprising outside of a few things, though it might have been down a little bit more than what some were maybe expecting, which is probably why we're seeing some of the reactions that we're currently seeing. With that said, though, let's just go and kind of take a look at some of the numbers here. As you can see, 2.4 million PlayStation 5 units were sold, up 4%. Then PlayStation Plus subscriptions are at 47.3 million, up by 2%. PlayStation software sales are down quite significantly at 26%. 47.1 million units of software were sold, 6.4 million of those being first party. Monthly active PSN users are at 102 million, down 3%. And then you have the revenue that decreased by 2%, and then the profits, which also had a pretty significant drop at 37%. So as you can see here, this was not necessarily a very strong quarter on paper, though as I keep emphasizing, some of this was to be expected, primarily for a few different reasons. Of course, there's been a lot of talk about a recession right now, and we've had a lot of inflation in terms of prices for pretty much everything, so that does have an impact on the game industry as a whole. And then the other big part here is that, unfortunately, these supply issues for these consoles, they really just seem like they're in full effect right now, which is interesting to me because despite all that, Sony still remains very determined that they'll in fact still sell 18 million PlayStation 5 units for its entire fiscal year, which is almost 7 million more than they sold last year. They did reiterate that today, that they still expect 18 million units of PlayStation 5 sold for this fiscal year. Now, I mean, amidst all of these problems that are going on right now, that to me seems like a very lofty goal. So by selling 2.4 million units here, that's definitely not up to their internal expectations, and it really puts a lot of pressure on them to get things fixed up from this point forward. Because again, they're still sticking to that 18 million number. That's what their investors currently expect. Now, maybe they know something that we don't and are expecting some type of an improvement in their supply chain. As we just talked about earlier, Valve, they just announced a surprising improvement in their supply chain, and maybe Sony's expecting something similar here as well. I personally hope that's the case. I would love to start to see these consoles just be a little bit more readily available, though at the same time, they could also be sticking with the 18 million number to just kind of calm their investors. That's also possible, but I do remain very hopeful that we'll see some type of an improvement as this year goes on. The two parts here, though, that seems to be drawing a lot of attention are software sales and then profit. Both had a pretty significant drop that you don't necessarily want to see, and from my understanding, this does not include the Bungie acquisition for those that are curious. That's actually being pushed to next quarter from my understanding. Now, some have kind of pointed out the lack of big AAA game releases for the quarter, and that is notable. That obviously will have an effect on total software sold because, it's kind of hard to compete when you're not exactly getting new games. Last year, though, we were just coming off the launch of the PlayStation 5, and I think by this point, with so many games getting delayed in 2022, it's starting to impact these consoles more and more. These consoles, they've just been dealt a very tough hand this generation. Sony, though, they did warn us that we could continue to see this downward trend in software sales throughout the year, so this is not quite over either. I would expect similar results next quarter as well. Maybe after that, it'll start to pick up because you do have those big holiday games like God of War Ragnarok, you have Call of Duty, which is massive every single year, and hopefully Hogwarts Legacy, that does have a lot of potential if it does indeed release sometime in 2022. But as always, that kind of remains to be seen. For the time being, though, I don't think these results are necessarily anything to be freaked out about. I do think that a lot of it was expected, though I think the biggest concern is probably the big decrease in profit. A 37% drop is never something that you're going to want to see. I think what I'm a little bit more interested to know is that 18 million number that PlayStation has set. I am very curious if they can actually reach that because, if they do, there should be a flood of PlayStation 5s sometime here soon, and I'm very curious if that actually does happen. Let me know what you all think about this, though. Do you think that they can reach that 18 million goal that they have set? Let me know in the comments below. Now, we did also get an update for an upcoming Xbox console exclusive, and this is actually a first-party game being Grounded. The final game is officially set to release this year on September 27th. So yes, we can just all kind of celebrate now. Finally, a game that's not being delayed, and this release looks really cool, actually. The thing about Grounded is that it's been available in early access since 2020, and it kind of shocked the community in how good it actually is. It had a lot of success on Xbox and PC alike. It was among the best sellers on Steam on various occasions, and in fact, it's reached more than 10 million players across Xbox and PC. So this game's had a lot of success before it's even officially released, and probably probably one of the reasons that it's also getting a new animated series. Definitely keep an eye out for that. But yeah, Grounded has turned into a big surprise hit, and Microsoft is investing into it as they should be. And with that investment, the patience for an early access game like this, and the passion from Obsidian Entertainment, this small but delightful game is about ready to get a lot better and could potentially reach a lot more players. And that's because starting on September 27th, it will be getting its biggest update, including a new story mode that gives purposeful missions rather than just being a survival RPG. It essentially will be a legitimate RPG that Obsidian fans have grown to love so much, with a story and all starting September 27th. So for those that jumped into early access before and maybe wanted more than just that survival component, well, you're getting just that, and I think that there's a lot of potential here. First off, Grounded has turned into more of an RPG as it's gone through early access, but telling a story within a larger-than-life world like this, I think could be a lot of fun. Now, you don't tend to see these story type of games too often in survival games like this, with all the customization and stuff, but I think one good example of a game doing this the correct way is Dragon Quest Builders 2. If you've played that game, you know it's got that building aspect to it, and obviously it's centered around that, but at the same time, it's still a legitimate RPG with a charming story. And I want to see Obsidian's take on something like that because they've always been good at writing interesting stories. So there you have it. Mark your calendars for September 27th, and that means for you Xbox Game Pass subscribers as well, as this is a first-party game. Speaking of these games set in a larger-than-life world, though, one game that's really blown up in the last couple of months has been Hypercharge Unboxed. This really is just such a fascinating story because this here is a game that's been available for years on PC and the Nintendo Switch, but never really took off until it was announced for Xbox. Suddenly after that, there was just this explosion of interest that overtook this game. It went viral, and it's kind of easy to see why. This game just looks so good with you playing as an action figure in these childhood dreamlike environments. It's just so atmospheric, and honestly, I think with a game like this, it's just so great to see it finally get the recognition that it truly deserves. But now, it's also PlayStation fans' turn to hype this game up because the developers just announced they're going to do their very best to bring it to PlayStation as well. I imagine what's happening here is that it will have some type of staggered release. They don't have a huge team or anything like that, so what will probably happen is that they'll first release it on Xbox and then soon thereafter try to get it to PlayStation as soon as possible. Regardless, though, what we do know is that they are looking into bringing it over to PlayStation, and at the end of the day, everybody can just kind of be happy and have fun on Hypercharge Unboxed. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, with how ambitious the new Forge mode looks in Halo Infinite, do you think it could revitalize the community? And yes, most of you all do believe this will be the case, with 58% of you saying yes, while 30% of you all said no. And yes, I'm completely with you all on this one. It's actually kind of funny to me when I hear some people just kind of scoff at Halo Infinite when literally this game won the Game of the Year voted by fans at the Game Awards just last year. You know, that is very telling. It is a great game. The only problem with this game is it just kind of lacks in content that can sustain its multiplayer in a competitive industry. And from what we've seen in its new Forge mode, thanks to those leaks, it is absolutely incredible, and without a doubt, it will inject tons of content into it. You'll no longer just get those 343 maps to play on, but they'll probably take some of the best Forge creations and then put those into its main game as well. I mean, we're already seeing old Halo maps get remade in its Forge mode, and because of the limitless amount of possibilities that you have in Forge, you can't even tell that they were user created. It's not like past Halo games where it was clear when it was made by a user. So yes, I firmly do believe that Forge mode will have a big impact on helping Halo Infinite have a big bounce back, as it does solve its really only problem, and that's new content. I also believe that's why 343 has put other things on hold, because they know just how good Forge mode is, and after releases, they'll be able to add both user creations and their own stuff, which will be more frequent with the two working together. So yes, I am completely with you all on this one. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.